Hi folks, this is the Lost Mystery video log from Saturday the 21st of February 2015. So this is my archaeology video log looking at mystery archaeological objects. I haven't got a huge list of them, but a few of them are very plausible and a couple ain't. So without further ado, just like to say, Saturday I spent the time with the children, which was brilliant, and hopefully this video log you will all enjoy, and let's have your responses please. And again, video logs, people are watching them again, which is really good, and here we go. Here we go, unusual objects in archaeology. This image, the Antikythera computer, sometimes referred to as the mechanism, sometimes referred to as the clock, the astrolabe. All these fragments were found off the island of Antikythera in the Aegean in 1900 by a sponge diver. There were 4 bronze concretions in the ocean, and these were brought to the surface. The sponge diver didn't know what they were at all, but interestingly enough, the sponge diver knew that they were important enough not to interfere with them, and hence they survived to be slowly unravelled 2 years later by an expert of the Greek world. Moving on to the next image. This is how the Antikythera computer, early form of analog computer, looks on display. And initially, straight away, you could see these large cogs, and you could see the little teeth on them as well. 39 of these individually created cogs were found, and this early form of computer was put together 2,100 years ago, so that's 100 years BC. And the amazing thing about this is that it was probably one of a number of mechanisms put together on the island of Rhodes, because it was believed that most of the learned people were actually from the island of Rhodes at that time. Stands to reason that that's where the record hunters from the Alexandria Library would go to get the best books from the Rhodes book fairs of the time. The Antikythera mechanism computer looks very large from any of the images that you see, but in fact this is a recreation, and you can see the hand in there. That's the actual size. Very small device indeed, but that actually gives you the magnitude of the very interesting cogs and the tiny little teeth. Nothing like this would be seen for 1600 years, but anything like it that would be seen 1600 years later in the 1500s. The little teeth were much larger, and the mechanisms weren't as flowing and weren't as complicated as this thing created 2,100 years ago. Wow, we've actually got instructions for this machine. The instructions tell us how it works, what it does, and that's absolutely amazing. Anything that we find in the past, usually we don't have a clue what they are. We find pots and we think we know what they're used for, but we don't have a clue. We find iron objects which we think are weapons, when in fact they're something else. But this actually has instructions, and this leads me to say that with instructions with it, that these were manufactured, so there were a number of them. If you only had one of them, you wouldn't need instructions to how the thing worked, because the maker would just simply know how it worked. So technology is so advanced. That's an X-ray. You can see all the cogs. And as the technology improved in the 1950s with the devices that they had available then, and later on, they were able to put the slices of this clock together. It was 4 layers of cogs that would have to be wound once a day, and would actually have 3 dials on it, giving you 3 sets of different readings. And there's the Antikythera mechanism or computer. This is basically could be classed as an early Enigma machine, where the Enigma machine would obviously give out different readings, and would obviously be translated by German operators, which was eventually cracked at Bletchley in the 1944, wasn't it? That's my knowledge of the Second World War. But the Antikythera mechanism is truly something very advanced. It would tell you, give you an idea of the days of the month, where the planets would be, and so on. And this is why you had 3 readouts on it. Quite amazing when you think about it. Next object. This is known as the Baghdad battery. The Baghdad battery was an amazing object found in the 1930s alongside a number of similar objects as well. Unfortunately, the asphalt stopper was cracked open by the person who actually found it, revealing a few copper gadgets inside and an iron gadget inside. That asphalt thing on the top was very important, essentially, to understanding what this thing was. Was it a battery? Was it, as some people believe, to hold a scroll? Was it simply something that we have no idea what it was used for, but the asphalt fitting on the top being lost has wrecked our understanding of what this thing is? But there you go. Basically, it's basically a 6-inch tall cylinder vase made of ceramic with a copper tube, with a copper stopper at the bottom, held in by asphalt, with a nail, which would have, an iron nail, seemingly an iron rod, which would have been suspended into this tube, not touching the side of this tube, and obviously creating a current from a liquid that was placed into it. There you go. You can see that this asphalt stopper on the top would have held the iron object in the copper cylinder inside this ceramic vase. The protruding from the stopper may have been a copper grounding wire, maybe, and a liquid would have been placed within the copper cylinder, and another liquid placed on the outside. Some actually have said that this was actually an early form of hand grenade, because when the 2 liquids mixed, it would have created a reaction, and that reaction would have caused an explosion. But that's a more extreme way of looking at this Baghdad battery. And other rods were found indicating that this was used, 2 of these batteries were used in tandem in electrolysis to obviously move gold from a gold object to plate, a silver object, giving the silver object the appearance of gold. This next object is the Delhi pillar. The Delhi pillar itself is a solid wrought iron pillar, probably built in sections, that you can't really see today. This pillar today stands above the surface 7.1 meters in height. There's probably about 1.5 meters below the surface, and this pillar itself was constructed 1,600 years ago. it's so precise that nothing like this would be created for approximately another 1,400 years. Some believe it was built in one piece, but now we don't believe it was built in sections. But give or take that, the iron pillar is still standing after 1,600 years with very little signs of rust. There it is, the Delhi pillar. Just look at the last slide again, but you can see the top of this, the beautiful capital that gives you the skills of the founders of the time. Another thing that can be said about this Delhi pillar is that it was created in a lost forging process, drop forging process, which it was hammered so much that any impurities were brought to the surface, and those impurities have created a patina, stopping it rusting. And it's a beautiful pillar, surviving after 1,600 years. Toad in a hole! This is one of those fantasy objects of archaeology, or is it? Many toads, frogs were found, it's believed, in cylinders in the 1800s, 1900s, in rock. And it's said that as soon as a stonemason would break open a rock, a toad would crawl out or a frog would jump out. But some believe now that it was simply that frogs and toads were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were wandering along as the stonemasons were breaking open rocks, and suddenly they would see a toad and they would think that the toad had come out of the rock. The idea that toads and frogs could not be preserved in these rocks and live, and how did they get into the rocks, we don't know. That's been disproven, as I said, more or less. Reverend Buckland in 1820 collected a load of toads together, sealed them in sandstone blocks and limestone blocks, placed them in his garden and dug them up the following year. Most of the toads had died. Some of the poor toads that had lived in the limestone blocks, he sealed them again in other limestone blocks to see if they would live another year, and all would die. But he proved that it was unlikely, very much, that these toads and frogs could ever be in these rocks and live for any period of time. So discounting the reports of toads in the hole, I would say. Couldn't get that out then. But there are opportunities where you might get a flint nodule with a small hole, and a baby toad crawls in, gets bigger, can't get out, is fed with water, and little insects crawl in there, and the toad might be able to live. But that's a long shot. This next object is known as the Quimbaya plain. The Quimbaya is actually probably the wrong pronunciation in Colombia. Up to 36 of these objects have been found in ceramic, in gold like this, and all seem to replicate plains from over 1,000 years ago. But some naturalists believe that they actually represent a certain type of bird in that area that can be this form and look like a plane. From one example I did see actually on the internet, came through on Facebook, which I didn't take any notice of, was that they had found, seemingly carved into a piece of stone, a pilot-like figure in the cockpit, seemingly on this, but can't really say if that's real or not, which it probably isn't. Quickly, the Maine coin found in North America, in the state of Maine, a coin from a Viking king, probably from Norway, and this Viking leader Olaf. The coin dates from as early as 1067. Some people believe that this was a sign that the Vikings actually got to America. The coin probably indicates that it was a trade coin which made its way through to the Native American peoples. This was one of 30,000 objects found at the main site. This is the only one of Norwegian origin there, however. Probably a trade item. Finally, beginning of the 1990s, I had a friend called Fernanda who said to me about pottery being found in Rio de Janeiro Bay, and this pottery in Rio de Janeiro Bay is obviously Roman. And she said that when the archaeologists found it, they reported to the newspapers, and the newspapers were basically told not to say any more about these because it believed that nobody wanted to start thinking about the fact that people had actually got to South America before the Spanish in the late 1400s, early 1500s. And the pottery was placed back onto the harbour floor of Rio de Janeiro. Nothing else was said, but now more and more of this evidence is coming out, proving that at some time traders with Roman amphora did actually get to Rio de Janeiro Bay, whether it was 400 AD 400 or much later, we don't know, but this is evidence that some boat actually got there. And there's apparently a number of amphoras at the bottom of this bay, but more evidence is need to be seen. And here's a little map of where Rio de Janeiro is, and the mouth of the Pillars of Hercules just above Mauritania. And this closes the lecture of last word. This closes the lecture of unusual artifacts today. And thanks for watching and looking at these images. Watching this video log, and keep in touch. Thanks, folks.